Hi all, my name is Andrey. I have been doing InfoSec for more than 15 years. I was an integrator, engineer lead, tester. So at some point I decided to take a step back and take a vendor's perspective. That's how I got employed at Positive Technologies, and I have been with the company for 2 years in the engineering department. I'm still doing project work. Spoiler alert. I didn't see too much difference, vendor side or integrator side. It's just that I can no longer push the blame to the vendor and their product quality. The previous talk was really detailed in terms of methodology. Building your architecture has been very interesting. The importance of architecture is absolutely true. Otherwise, you're losing money, you'll start losing resources at later stages when you actually implement your system. You might need to do a lot of redesign, so architecture comes first. So it needs to be married with the rest of things. It's a foundation for the project, yes, but then in any project you have certain stakeholders. Usually that's the customer, the integrator, and the vendor. The vendor and the integrator can be the actual implementing party. Sometimes this can be one organization, but usually there are those three. They all interrelate, they all interact in different combinations. And then, customer side, you have the IT department and InfoSec department. Everybody needs to be happy about everybody else at the end of the day. So this is what can happen. One will do the heavy lifting, but this will never work. This is not how you drive results. If someone, just one party, does the job, they can even implement the system, but if the customer doesn't need it, it'll never survive. This is not our approach either. Everybody standing by, waiting for the problem to go away. For a successful project, you need this: a coherent team where everybody understands what their role is and what they need to do. Everybody pooling their efforts, putting those fires out, and achieving success. Let's speak about each of the roles a bit. The customer is the key participant in any project, and it's down to them to have the project implemented appropriately. Only the customer can set the goals and objectives properly. The goal that we want is practical usage of the system and the defenses. I saw a lot of projects where it got implemented, the box was ticked off, the budget was spent, everybody forgot it, it didn't get used. But then there is an incident and the customer is unhappy. We have the system, it seems to be online. What do we do about it? Then there are other cases. Some companies, some customers procure the system, but kind of forgot to implement it. A customer came to me after a ransomware attack. We have the protection, but we didn't implement it. What do we do? Just pull the plug on it, disconnect the system. But how do I report it? We spent the money to buy it, but we can't investigate it. Can you integrate CEM in one day? Oh, no. So do implement the things that you buy, right? And the customer needs to make the push for it. They need to explain properly to the integrator and the vendor that they need this. As an integrator, I was really sad any time when the system didn't get used. And then customer side, there is IT and InfoSec. You need proper relationships, good relationships between them all. If you cannot, you need an integrator. And good relationships between teams always deliver better timelines and results. Then you have the integrator. They come in for a project as a team of experts. They need to know the architecture from the designers. They need to be made aware of the methodologies and approaches. Designers and engineers need to have the skills in the products that the system is built with. It's not just reading some documentation. This needs to be actual life skills. The engineers need to know what products they're using and how they work. Then, an integrator needs to have their team as well, designers, consultants, engineers, and project leads or project managers. I think project managers account for around half of the success. They do all the scheduling, they observe and monitor deadlines, they resolve all the administrative hiccups. So it's on them to make the tech guys free of all this stuff. Otherwise, this will decrease the effectiveness of the project. Onto the vendor. It's a participant of the project. They supply some software. That might seem that that's the end of their role on the project, but that's not true. When I worked as an integrator or a vendor, I saw that, well, for one thing, any vendor would have technical support, and you need to use it. Then, if the integrator has a problem during implementation, they can go to the vendor and get support. Depending on your SLA, this can work better or worse, but they would always help. And then the vendor can be part of the project as a designer or an architect, not just tech support. They can do this in goodwill if they have a good relationship with the integrator or the customer. This can be a proper business transaction or as a service. Lots of technologies offer services like that, where we support implementations and do supervision of the architecture. This is where the vendor comes in to monitor the proper implementation of the project at its phases or stages. Here are the stages, actually. We have the team in place, so now we need to plan the stages. I think these icons work fine. Let's start from stage 0, a pilot. I don't really think that you need this. As an integrator, we never did pilots. Always tried to avoid this, because it's an expense item for the integrator. Any resource can be better used. Always the case. Without spending this money.
On the vendor side, I do see lots and lots of pilots that we run. However, so many pilots are done just for the sake of having a pilot, and this is so wrong. When clients say, well, I just want to see it in action. Why would you want to see it in action? You can see it at a bench, you can do reference visits, you can, have your demonstration run at a test bench. Why would you want to do a pilot for the same purpose? And also, please remember that pilots, they are also energy and effort intensive, not just for the integrator, but also for you as a client. And we're talking about significant energy required. Now, here at Positive Technologies, we have collected some statistics that shows that, well, we certainly want to limit the time of pilots to 45 days, but 45 days is still a lot. You can run a whole project over this time. I do understand that pilots will be required in some cases. For example, your internal documents may stipulate that, pilots must be part of the tendering process. But even if this is the case, you can first do a reference visit and do some training, and, then you will do your pilot faster and cheaper. Okay, the next stage involves the client developing the specs, the statement of work, so to speak, where they are going to clearly stipulate the goals and the objectives. And as they develop SOW, it is very important to stipulate the specific security functions that you want to have by the end of the project, and they gotta be realistic. Please do not come up with functions which are simply unavailable in the market. Consider what's currently available, because the functions you build into it which cannot be supported, well, they will be at least a major headache. You may want to, do some kind of a band-aid or a quick fix later on. I had a client that really wanted us to do some user behavior tracking, and we had to install lots of CCTV cameras around the office. And you know what? This quick fix was discontinued after the end of the project. Now, this stuff doesn't really work. You can rest assured that the functions built into the product from day zero can be maintained going forward. It's a good idea to engage the integrator as you develop your specs, but still, obviously, you as a client will be playing the most important role here. So, stage 2, you've selected your integrator, and then you do an audit. The idea of the audit is that you prepare data or the upcoming, architectural work, so to speak. This way, the integrator will have a better understanding of what is there in the infrastructure of the client. Because if you simply follow the specs published as part of the tender documentation, you can easily fail. Now, my practice usually involves these 3 stages. First, I do a general questionnaire, learning more about, the general landscape of the architecture. Then, I do a clarifying kind of a questionnaire where I ask specific questions about, say, software development, and so on and so forth. Now, for each individual unit, we do a more kind of in-depth analysis, and if we feel we lack some data at these stages, we will do interviews, during which we will select a particular we'll nominate a person who will, report back to the client. Now, stage 3, adaptation of the specs. So we take the audit data and we also combine it with a threat model. The threat model is a document that I believe every client must have, even if they are not obliged by the law to stay on the good side of various laws and bylaws. Your threat model can reflect the recommendations of FSTC or some other risk model, as long as this risk model is in line with your actual infrastructure. So such a collaboration of the client with the integrator should be designed to properly identify the risks that apply to your system. So you've done this. Stage 4 is the actual design stage. At this stage, you need to maintain up-to-date project documentation. So in your project papers, you will be describing your overall info-sec system, so to speak, and the specific settings that apply to it. Please remember that InfoSec is a combination of technical and organizational measures. That's why I'm listing here organizational measures as a must, effectively. So InfoSec people should also, communicate to the rest of the company, reminding everybody else that, there are specific rules to observe. Now, at the design stage, when you are developing your project documents, it's very important to do, more than just the memos, because, specs are extremely important. The tendering process, the procurement process takes a lot of time. And, if, for example, you're buying software, usually the cycle is like over 30 days. So you have the specs, you send it to the procurement department, then you will continue your design process. So by the time implementation starts, this process should have completed, because otherwise, it will extend the overall time of the project. Now, the next stage is obviously implementation, and this is a picture that, always works. So we do know that implementation is always, pain and suffering, but your engineers are expected to stay calm. I remember how I worked, as a junior in the design department, and my boss at some, overall corporate party And, we always had, difficult relations with, engineers versus designers. So the head of the design department said the following, said, designers are certainly great people, no doubt about that. They develop those documents, but they can always make mistakes there. Engineers, they do not have this luxury. The engineers are there at the forefront, and they are the people who implement projects. So please take good care of engineers, because nothing is more important at the implementation stage. Stage 7, testing. It could be acceptance testing. So naturally, we have a stage called acceptance testing or attestation testing. The difference between the two is that, under the current legislation, for example, you are expected to run specific tests. So acceptance testing can take different shapes, so to speak. So, for example, it could be just a checklist where you check, whether it has been successful or not. Or you can do the so-called, cyber tests or cyber drills when you invite a red team to hack your system. And this is a great way, indeed, of running your tests. Obviously, there will be limits to its applicability. However, if your system has survived an attack like this, now this obviously shows that you've done something right in terms of its implementation. So you might be thinking that that's the end of the journey, but it isn't, because there is stage 8, which is operation. And I'm showing it as a separate stage because naturally it is, well, effectively the most important stage for the client. And obviously we should never really leave the client alone, sort of to face the gazebo, the product on their own. They should always be able to count on the support from the vendor or the systems integrator. So if something happens to the system, the integrator should be cut about it, right in and help them. So I was showing this figures there. So the one with the tie in blue is obviously the client, and shown with the dotted lines are those who are helping. And you may have noticed that, in most of my slides, I had 3 characters, 3 figures shown. Now, operation, technical support as well, because we also need to regularly check the system for the level of security. And you can also do it as a cyber drill. So remember that a system like this must be just operated. It must be actualized, brought up to date, expanded, and that probably requires buying more hardware and also updating the software. Now, where was I? Now, we've been talking about architecture here, and naturally, architecture is important. And it may have sounded banal to you, so like you all understand that these are the main processes. However, these are very important steps. And missing any of them is a bad idea. What I've been talking about is the architecture of the project and architecture of how you develop a system. Like I said, pilots in many cases make very little sense. Requirements have to be realistic. After the audit, you always need to run adaptation, because your system, in all probability, should be realistic rather than purely driven by the specs. You also need to bring your project docs up to date on a regular basis, because imagine, you lose a member of the project team, you can easily lose out on a lot of important information. Delivery terms are very important. Also, make sure your engineers do not burn out. Do not shelve your system, because it's such a shame when it happens. Also, do a regular assessment of your security standards and stay a team. Thank you so much.